Okay, we are recording.
Good afternoon. I'm going to take my mask off just briefly so you can hear me. So for those of you who I may not have had the pleasure of meeting yet, I'm Nicole Maag. I'm the Vice President of Operations for UMRC in Porter Hills. And that means that I get the pleasure of overseeing all of our communities, which is 14 from shore to shore. And Natalie invited me here today to just provide a brief kind of situation update. So the things I'm going to share, and then we'll open it up to questions, is the current numbers, the current COVID count. I'm going to provide you a brief regulatory update. We'll do a brief board and strategic planning update, as well as share some upcoming communication. So let's start with the numbers. I know that all of you have been incredibly diligent in stopping the spread of COVID-19 here at Cedars of Dexter. Even when it's been incredibly difficult as a community, you've banded together to follow the regulations and support each other in protecting this community we love so much. And our efforts are working. So up until this point, Cedars of Dexter has had 0 cases, 0 residents, and 0 team members. Currently, today, shore to shore, in those 14 communities I spoke of, we have 4 cases. And we have a COVID unit which exists in our Chelsea campus and at our Porter Hills Village campus that we hope continues to be empty, but we do have it available if there was a need for that. As you know, you can check our website anytime. It's updated every single day with the current cases shore to shore. And an interesting fact I wanted to share with you today, we were just looking at the numbers yesterday, and we are required in our skilled nursing to do COVID testing, and in other areas, particularly related to care, we also do a lot of COVID testing. And since the beginning of the pandemic, shore to shore, in our care areas, we've done 13,000 COVID tests. So that is a lot of testing that's been happening. And so, however, we're very grateful that our numbers continue to be low, but I can tell you that I know that can change really quickly. I talk to a lot of organizations, a lot of other senior living communities, and I've seen how quickly a good quality organization can go from 0 cases to a full-scale outbreak. And I say this really to encourage you to continue to be vigilant in your efforts. We are watching every day the cases in Michigan rise to numbers that we haven't seen throughout this entire pandemic. So your individual efforts will make all the difference in protecting Cedars of Dexter and keeping those numbers low. So let's talk briefly about the regulations, and these regulations are really created to keep those numbers low. There have been many governing bodies during this pandemic. There have been rules and guidances and regulations and recommendations that change very, very quickly. And one of those changes just recently was the Michigan Supreme Court's decision. And the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that the governor acted unconstitutionally when she extended the state of emergency without legislative support. And therefore, the executive orders created after April 30th no longer were valid. You can imagine that put us in limbo for a few days. But I will tell you that very quickly, MDHHS, which is the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, stepped in to fill the void from those executive orders. And since that ruling, MDHHS has created emergency orders in place of all of the previous executive orders. And other state departments like MIOSHA, which is the Michigan Occupational Health and Safety Administration, has also stepped in to fill some gaps left by the executive orders. So essentially, what's important for us to know is that all the executive orders we were operating under previously, have been reinstated through various governing bodies in the state of Michigan. And 2 of those emergency orders I want to talk about specifically that were issued from MDHHS really have the most impact on our operations here at Cedars of Dexter. The first is an emergency order that was issued on 10/5. And that's the order that requires us to continue to wear masks, to be socially distanced, and to keep our gatherings to 10 or less when inside, or 100 or less when we're outside. The other executive order was the one issued on 10/6, and that is specific to all levels of senior living. And I think that this point can sometimes be confusing for folks. If you didn't know to look for it, or you weren't in the senior living industry, you may not know that the state has specific orders directed to senior living. And that's primarily because seniors have been identified as one of the most vulnerable populations in relation to COVID. And those specific senior living orders require us to do things like report our cases in a timely manner. We have to continue to limit communal activities and dining and gathering. That isn't to say that it's prohibited. Today, we are allowed to have communal dining and activities, but it's very regulated, and there are lots of processes and procedures we must follow through the state to successfully have communal dining and activities in senior living. In additionally, there's specific CDC guidance for senior living, and that says very clearly the things that we should or shouldn't be doing in our communities. So how do we keep track of all these regulations and all these changes? How do we make decisions based on this? And I want you to know that we meet very regularly. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, we were meeting every single day, and that continued for a long period of time. Today, it's slightly less frequent. So the strategic team meets twice a week to discuss all things COVID, any regulation changes, and to make any decisions from a strategic standpoint. In addition, we have a group called COVID Operations, and that's made up of all the leaders. Natalie is a part of that group, shore to shore. And we also meet twice a week to review any changes in the regulations, any concerns, any current COVID changes that we need to be aware of. And then in addition, we have a separate infection control group. And this group is made up of all the clinical leaders, shore to shore, who are evaluating any clinical changes or infection control specific policies or procedures that we need to implement. So it's a lot to keep up with, but I want you to feel confident that we have the right people at the table meeting very frequently to keep up with all of the changes that are happening. One of the parts of the orders I do want to speak about just briefly is the visitation portion. I know that this portion in particular has been difficult for residents and team members since it was originally instituted with the original executive order months ago. And the current rule is very clear that there will be no visits inside unless you meet very specific criteria. And that does apply to independent living in the same exact way that it applies in our care areas. And although we are required to follow those rules, we are acutely aware of the impact to families and residents and team members that this prolonged isolation has created. And although we are dedicated as team members to fill the void created by a lack of visits, we also believe it is our responsibility to advocate at the state level for our residents and their families. And to that end, you likely received a memo from Steve Fedico, our CEO, last week, talking about upcoming advocacy plans for residents, team members, and families. And this plan is meant to really help residents and families and staff tell their stories, as well as advocate for a safe and deliberate visitation plan that will protect all of our stakeholders as much as possible. So stay tuned for more information on that as it'll be coming out hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So a couple high-level corporate updates. For those of you that spend much time on the Chelsea Retirement Campus, you know that we are wrapping up the very end of our 5-year master planning project. So that will finish in the next 3 weeks. It was delayed about 6 months due to COVID. We were supposed to finish that 5-year master plan specifically in Kresge in the spring. But we are back on track and we expect to finish that in the coming weeks. That isn't to say they won't continue to have projects on that campus, but that formal master plan that was developed by the board will officially close out by the end of the year. Another thing that board and leadership is continuing to work on is strategic planning post-affiliation, the development of a master plan for our West Side communities, and developing a shared mission and vision shore to shore. You can imagine that this work was slow due to the pandemic, but it has continued and we've found alternative ways to continue to work through this at the board level. And there'll be continued opportunities to hear more about this as we accomplish more towards those goals. So one of the communications I wanted to also make you aware of is Kim Hoppy, who is the CFO for both the East and the West Side, will be coming at the beginning of December to discuss the current financials specifically for our entire organization, but also specifically for Cedars of Dexter. She'll also discuss the audit, and that's why it's delayed. She wanted to wait until we had audit results so that she could share that with residents as well. But one of the things I wanted to share with you in advance of her coming is related to rate increases. So as part of our affiliation, one of our shared goals was to align the fiscal years for both East and West. And with that aligning of the fiscal years, UMRC will have a new fiscal year that starts on July 1st. Kim will give you much more details about that and is much more qualified than I am to speak about that. But how that impacts you today is that we will not have rate increases starting January 1st like we traditionally do. We will be pushing those rate increases out to July 1st. You will get more information about that in your next statement. And like I mentioned, Kim will come the first week of December and really give you more details related to that. Also, in addition, Steve will come within the first couple months of the calendar year and provide kind of the state of the corporation update to all of you as well. So I want to thank Natalie for inviting me today and thank all of you really for your continued support. Every note that you write, every letter that you send, every kind word that you offer doesn't go unnoticed. And in fact, it's incredibly appreciated. I think that this has been a really trying time for our residents, for our team members, and for our organization. But I also think that we are in this together. And I appreciate all of your support and your efforts through this really uncertain time. So thank you, Natalie.
Thank you. I'm going to scoot a little bit closer to the computer here. And for our folks at home, we have 16 attendees, so thank you all. But at this time, if you did have any questions for Nicole, you could submit those into the Q&A box if you have any follow-up questions. And just a side note too, I think the last time Nicole was here to do a town hall was when I was on a maternity leave, and Jackie was with you on that video. So much has happened here over the past 7 months, and I do as well want to thank you as residents and all of your family members for being supportive of all of us and helping us stay safe, as well as the team members and being patient and kind. And like Nicole said, your emails and notes and all of those kind words really do keep us going every single day. So very much appreciative of all of you and the patience that you have shown. Okay, we are not getting any questions at this time, which is just fine. Like Nicole was saying, we do have kind of the next update from the strategic team at a high level is from Kim Hoppy, and that is in early December. And then good to know that Steve will be with us in a few months too. So a question, maybe some clarification can help. It says gatherings of 10 or less inside and no visitors allowed seem to conflict.
So I'm not sure what the question is specifically there. But what I do know is that I will tell you, there are often times that regulations do conflict or don't maybe always make the most amount of sense, but they are what they are. And so what we do know is when having a gathering inside, and when I say inside, I'm not necessarily talking about your homes, because I think that's where the confusion can happen, that we have these separate regulations that dictate the homes of seniors, but not those in senior living, but not those out in the general community. So it is very specific that in senior living communities, we cannot have visitors in our homes. It's also very specific that in senior living, we can have communal activities. And the intent behind that is put on by the community. So think of a exercise class or some type of crafting class or an education class. If Natalie hosts something like that here at Cedars of Dexter, it must be 10 or less. If it's hosted outside, it must be 100 or less. The other question that I sometimes get is, well, how can we have communal dining? Because that is greater than 10 or less. There are specific dining rules related to capacity of a dining room. So in a dining room, you can have a capacity, it'll sometimes be 50%, sometimes 25%, but the dining room is considered something different and has separate capacity limits outside of the gatherings. So I can imagine it may feel like if we can have gatherings of 10 or less, why can't I have gatherings of 10 or less in my home? And that is because there is a very specific emergency order issued by MDHHS that says in senior living, you cannot have visitors in your home.
And I think it has been confusing too, as we have continued to do more activities here on site, and you can kind of, compare different scenarios, and, we're always very, very safe here in the clubhouse if we are indoors, to have 10 or less people, and then of course have that distancing piece, trying to stay 6 feet away from one another. And then some outdoor things, which unfortunately are kind of dwindling down right now. But we were really utilizing our lovely outdoor space here, and we were able to have more than 10 people in place. So today, many of you know that we had our first indoor cardio class, our first stretch and balance indoor. So we did have some folks on Zoom at home, and then as well as a number in the classroom. So it seems like there are still many new things for us to navigate together. And again, everyone has been so patient and so willing to use all of these technologies too. That has been so neat to see. But again, everyone's just been great with that. And Nicole has touched on communal dining, and as hopefully you all are aware, we are opening up our dining room in the first week of November. So you all haven't gotten the official communications that really do a deeper dive into what those guidelines look like, but those will be coming to you this week, actually. So you will have more information on what returning to in-person dining looks like in terms of reservations, capacity limits, and all of those kinds of things. So stay tuned for more specifics on that. And I don't have any questions at this time. Nicole, can you think of anything that we didn't cover? It's kind of a lot at once there at home for you all too.
I think we covered a lot today. I would just encourage you that if you have questions or concerns, reach out to Natalie. Or if you need to, you can always reach out to me as well. Natalie is on a call with us shore to shore twice a week, and we're hashing through questions, concerns, things we're worried about. So if you have anything, you have any questions, any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. It actually makes us better as we kind of move through this unknown together.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all for attending. At the highest point, we had 18 folks at home, so it could be more since there's couples out there too. Thank you very much. Okay, we do not have questions because the presentation was very clear. Thank you for that. Thank you all for attending today, and you know how to get a hold of me if you do have follow-up questions, but we will see you all soon. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.